Welcome to Door County, Wisconsin.
Located in the northeastern part of the Badger State, Door County is a charming and picturesque destination, known for its natural beauty and quaint coastal communities. Bordered by Lake Michigan to the east and Green Bay to the west, the county boasts stunning waterfront views, pristine beaches, and vibrant fall foliage that draws visitors year-round.
With its lavender, lighthouses, kayaking, and fishing, Door County offers a serene escape for nature enthusiasts, families, and couples seeking a tranquil retreat in the heart of the Midwest. All that would change in 2019 when a string of gruesome murders shocked the quaint coastal county.
This is the story of the Door County Key Killer, an unsolved string of serial killings claiming the lives of 7 residents and terrifying hundreds more.
So, we invite you to join us as we take a look into these crimes, the people involved, and the theories as to who may have been behind the whole affair.
Dearest listeners,
welcome to Locked Door County.
Today we plan to discuss the next murder perpetrated by the Door County Key Killer.
But first, an update in the Hayes case. For those of you who may have forgotten, that was the dead guy in episode 1.
On Thursday, the 26th, a press conference would be held at the home of one of the suspects with information shaking the case.
Let's take a listen.
Members of the press, thank you for being here and hearing what I have to say. I understand it has been good for yourselves to cover these murders and to drag our names through the mud, but I don't blame you, nor do I harbor any ill will. You're just doing your jobs, and I guess I did sleep with a married man. And as much as I do have faith in the DCPD, I fear for myself and my own well-being that should a piece of my testimony be leaked, it may be twisted and defame both myself and the late Dr. Hayes. So I've chosen to release this information firsthand to guarantee that it is not misunderstood. I have already spoken to the police and Miss Hayes about this information and have assured their support in releasing this statement. Dr. Hayes and I, on more than 10 occasions during my 4-month-long employment, slept together in the practice. Almost always this was paired with the recreational use of nitric oxide. After a few times, I began to notice the side effects. I disliked them, and so I stopped partaking, obviously. Dr. Hayes, on the other hand, seemed to be addicted and on limited occasions used the gas during work hours. Never before treating a patient, of course, but at least twice before working on administrative affairs. Also, notably, I believe Dr. Hayes was having a second affair. I believe he spent his final night with her in the office. I believe it was with her he used the nitrous oxide, and I believe it was she who killed him. I have given the police my limited information about this other woman, and hope they can find her and make an arrest. Thank you.
So, why did she choose to publicize this information? Why did she fear a leak?
Probably because one had already happened 2 days prior, when an anonymous flash drive was left at a local newspaper with the complete recording of Julia's confidential FBI deposition.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Janine feared that if the information came out, it would hurt both Carlotta and herself, as well as give a, quote, false impression of the professionality of the late orthodontist. And no, that is not a real word.
So, what was the limited information she did give the police?
She was clearly more important to him than I was. He would text her immediately, every time. Plus, he had this, custom ringtone for her. On a few occasions, we would be moments away from, well, you know. And then he would get a text on his phone, and it would play, The Great Gates of Kiev, or something stupid like that. And he would always excuse himself and just get up and leave, right when we were in the middle of it. Ugh. He called her the woman who gave him whatever he wanted, and saved her in his phone under the name Jay. Ugh. Which, I have to admit, hurt, because I was Janine, in parentheses, work.
She goes on to explain that she believed this woman, Jay, visited Dr. Hayes in the office. The two used nitrous, slept together, and then he was killed.
However, police and the coroner had already administered a sort of rape kit to see if he had been intimate the night of his death and found no evidence.
Though this does not rule out Janine's theory entirely. The two may have done the above, but the murder happened before possible intimacy.
Either way, the second affair was not public, and like a cat formerly in a bag, it was there to stay.
Anyway, let's move on in the case and talk about another woman previously mentioned, Jaqueline Wright-Charles.
Jaqueline Wright-Charles, born Jacqueline Wright, was born in 1973 in Milwaukee. Her mother, Patricia, was a single mother, raising her alone on the South Side. She was a maid for 3 different downtown hotels and often would bring Jackie to work with her, leaving her in an empty hotel room or in the bar while she worked.
Unsurprisingly, Jackie grew up with a deep-seated drive and would go on to graduate top of her class from Ohio State with a degree in hospitality management. She was raised in hostels and, knowing a thing or two, would go on to run them. Upon graduation, she got a job with an international hotel chain, which she would work at in their office in New York, in the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
In 1998, she would meet her future husband, banker, and investment consultant, Robert Charles.
After a whirlwind courtship, they would marry a year later in 1999.
In 2001, she would be working in New York when the terrorist attacks on 9/11 led to the destruction of the Twin Towers. Luckily, Jacqueline was seeing her obstetrician. A combination of survivor's guilt and imposter syndrome led to Jackie checking to a psychiatric institution in Milwaukee a month later.
It was at this institution where she would give birth to her daughter, Roberta, or Robbie Jr.
The birth of her daughter was the shock she needed to return back to her normal life.
Jackie immediately left the institution in December of 2002. 1 month later, she would find out she was pregnant again. She would give birth to her second child and son, Benji, in 2003.
In 2007, Jackie would return to the workforce, taking a job with a smaller luxury hotel chain. She was brought on to manage a new development in Door County. Her husband, who ran his own consulting firm, was able to find a new job in the area, and so the family relocated.
Jackie would run the Door County branch of Northwest Suites. In 2015, she would oversee the acquisition of Luft apartments and convert 2 of their 6 properties into vacation properties. It is there that she would meet Andrea Agnato, as he would lease the ground floor space in one of the properties for his new restaurant, La Cucina della Fabrizia.
This would lead to a fruitful and close relationship between both Andrea and Jacqueline, but also between Agnato and Wright-Charles's families. A friendship that would spur both a business and a romantic partnership.
As you may remember, Jackie hired Phoebe, the Agnato's eldest daughter, as an executive assistant, and the 2 families' youngest sons would enter into a relationship in the summer of 2019, while both working at a summer camp in the local library.
Roberta, or Robbie Jr., was also close friends with Enrico and Rebecca. All this to say, the families were very close.
And that's not just in a personal sense, but also geographically. The Wright-Charleses had a home only 15 minutes walking from Quinn House, the Agnato's villa.
So it was a great shock to the family when Andrea had turned up dead in his pool.
And an even greater shock when Jackie was found dead in her kitchen later that same week, with Phoebe Agnato bludgeoned and unconscious on the floor beside her.
Let's get into the timeline.
1 day prior, Wednesday the 25th, at around 7 a.m., the family would notice their kitchen sink was broken.
Around 7:40, as they did every morning, Robert left for work, dropping the kids off on the way. Notably, Dante Agnato was still staying with the family as Quinn House was still being searched by the police, and the rest of the family had been put up in a hotel. Also notably, Enrico would be staying with the Marlins in their apartment below the still active crime scene at Hayes Orthodontics.
At 8:33, Jackie would call Model Plumbing. While we don't know what was said on the call, it lasted 12 minutes, and Jackie would write out to the family calendar that the plumber would arrive at 10 the following day.
At 9:30, Phoebe would arrive for work.
In our first departure from the day-to-day, Julia van Hindenburg would arrive at the home, ringing their doorbell at 1:15. She would be let in.
19 minutes later, she would leave in a huff, and this audio is caught on their doorbell.
No.
Grandma!
Phoebe, I don't like you being alone with her.
I'll be fine.
I know what she's capable of. You don't.
Grandma, what? I can handle myself.
You are coming back with me.
Grandma,
I don't care.
I can handle myself. I'll be fine. By tomorrow, you two will calm down and everything is gonna go back to the way it was. It'll all be over.
Fine.
Interesting choice of words there, Phoebes.
Reluctantly, Julia leaves. An hour later at 2:30, Phoebe leaves, and at 4, the others return.
The next morning, Thursday the 26th, the family once again goes about business as usual, leaving at 7:40. At 9:30, Phoebe arrives. At 10, nothing.
15 minutes after his scheduled time, Jackie calls Modell Plumbing, getting no answer.
At 10:23, the camera doorbell deactivates. This ends any audio and video evidence from the front of the house. And as these homes were in an affluent and more private area, and the nearest usable camera in the area would have been a traffic camera on the intersection of Chaucer Street and Rabelais Avenue.
An intersection about 2 miles away. The next bullet on the timeline is a receipt from a local hardware store for a new P-trap pipe, paid in cash.
The owner recalls selling the pipe to a girl whose description fits Phoebe.
At 1:11, a local florist named Winnie Conrad drops off an arrangement of fresh flowers.
At 1:28, Jackie's car is seen at the intersection on her way back home.
These are the last 2 events before the estimated time of death at 1:48 p.m.
At 2:06, the doorbell camera turns back on, and at 4:02, Robert and Robbie Jr. return home and find the scene. At 4:09, they call 911. Then Robert calls Julia.
Police arrive and begin to secure the scene at 4:16.
So, what did Robert and Roberta find at the scene?
Nothing short of an absolute horror show.
Police noted large amounts of blood across the kitchen, along with broken dishes strewn about the place. On the floor next to Jackie was a cutting board with a knife lodged inside.
Most interestingly was the sink. It was filled with a mix of bleach, blood, and water with a wrench submerged inside, and on the wrench, police found Jackie's keys.
At the center of the kitchen island, police found a fresh vase of flowers.
Jacqueline appeared to have a broken arm and a dislocated shoulder. Her skull was caved in from head trauma, but she had also suffered stab wounds in the abdomen and arms. She also displayed defensive wounds, meaning she tried to fight back, and had high traces of temazepam in her system. Sleeping pills.
But what about Phoebe?
Well, that's the interesting part. Phoebe was still alive. Upon their arrival, police would realize that Phoebe had a weak but stable pulse. Julia calls Nina, and Nina would arrive at the scene around 4:30. Nina joins Phoebe in the ambulance while Julia stayed with the others.
Police immediately began their investigation.
So who wanted Jackie and Phoebe dead? Let's dive deeper into this case after the break.
Welcome back to another episode of Lockdoor County.
Before the break, we learned about the murder of Jaqueline Wright-Charles and attempted murder of Phoebe Alganado.
Police quickly drafted a list of possible suspects.
From her husband Robert to Winnie the florist and even Phoebe, police narrowed in on not only numerous possible suspects, but numerous possible stories.
But why did their list include the likes of Carlotta Hayes and Hetty Lynn Spackle?
Obviously, Winnie and Phoebe were in the home that day, and Robert easily could have come and gone, but to understand the other two, we first have to take a look at Janine's statement.
Yes, both police and the general public believed that the other woman in question was Jacqueline. Dr. Hayes' J was quickly tied to Jacqueline, with 3 sources coming forward claiming to have seen them having dinner on different nights.
Issue here is that Philip's phone was seemingly cleaned. No references to her true identity can be discerned from the messages between them, only dates and times.
Dates and times that correspond with blocks on Dr. Hayes' calendar. Police did their best to narrow down his location at those times, but made no real headway.
But the importance here is that this implies that Jacqueline had been cheating on her husband, and with that information coming out the day of her murder, it is possible that Robert snapped and, like suspected with Philip, a confrontation went sour.
Or was it Carlotta who hunted her down? Janine's press statement painted the Philip and Jay relationship as a much more emotionally and romantically connected one, while Philip and Janine were purely physical. Plus, further evidence on the matter proved that the alleged affair has been going on for more than 5 years, extending into multiple times where the two had suffered fertility issues.
So, could one construe that Carlotta had the motivation to kill Jacqueline?
Things got even murkier for Carlotta when police found her driving past the same intersection only 15 minutes before the estimated time of death.
Even worse, police found large traces of temazepam in Jacqueline's screens. Jacqueline didn't have temazepam, nor did anyone else in her house. Who did have temazepam? Carlotta Hayes.
I already lost my husband, and I had to deal with you accusing me of his murder. Now I find out he was having not one but two affairs, and I'm accused of killing someone else. I am not a violent person. I didn't kill anyone. And this is starting to feel like a calculated character assassination. Yes, I did go to her house, but I didn't go inside.
The first possible look into the happenings at the Wright-Charles house.
Carlotta would return the next day to explain the events that happened.
I got there at about 1:50 and sat in my car for 5 minutes before leaving. I was going to confront her about everything, but I just couldn't build up the courage.
And so you sat there for 5 minutes and left?
Yes.
What did you see?
2 cars out front, but nothing really suspicious.
2 cars?
Yeah.
In the driveway?
Yeah, it looked like a Hyundai Santa Fe.
Thank you, Miss Hayes.
Jackie's car was in the garage. Phoebe parked out front. But who was the second car?
Well, the keen-eyed, keen-eared listener may have noticed that the list of people of interest in the case did not include Ralph Modell, the plumber. Why? Wasn't he supposed to be there that day? Wasn't the murder weapon a wrench? But then again, he never did show up, did he? Phoebe was the one who bought the P-trap pipe.
Or maybe he's not a suspect because he died in 2018. Ralph Modell died the 8th of December in 2018 after complications from a stroke.
So to put it bluntly, he definitely didn't kill anyone in 2019.
But where the things get even more interesting is his wife, a name we know all too well, Miss Hetty Lynn Spackle.
I told you, he died in 2018. I don't know who she talked to, but as sure as you know what wasn't my Ralphie.
So who fixed the pipe?
Police checked her phone, and when it opened on a YouTube tutorial.
So, as much as that leaves us with that answer, whose car was it in the driveway?
Police hoped to answer that question by checking the backup recording on the doorbell camera.
But instead, they found a detail that would prove a real curveball.
She turned it off herself.
Excuse me?
You had said you would check her phone, but I have access too. I hope you don't mind. And the cameras were turned off from her phone.
So you think her killer?
No, it would have needed a password. She had to have been the one who turned it off. I don't know the code.
Okay.
I've been told it many times, but I tend to forget it.
Who else knew the code?
My kids, maybe Phoebe. I don't know what Jackie and Phoebe told each other, but they were close, so it's possible. She had a key to our place, so she might have known the code. I don't really know why she would, though.
Okay.
Do you understand why they're targeting the business board?
What do you mean?
I'm not a detective, ma'am, and so I know it's not my place to say, but Philip, Andrea, and Jackie were all on the Door County Local Business Board. All of them. They were president, vice president, and secretary. And as I said, I know it's not my place to say, but, well, I don't really think that's a coincidence, right? I mean, if it is, then that's a pretty big one.
The Door County Local Business Board was founded in 2016 by Jackie and Andrea with the intent of fostering and aiding local businesses. They opened membership to any local business owners and held elections within the membership for its board. Jackie had been president and Andrea vice president since its founding and won re-election in 2018.
The board added Philip as secretary and 2 others in 2018, Stephen Black, who you may remember from episode 1.
The nitrous oxide tank was found outside his joinery shop.
He was made event coordinator, and Flora Warburton, a Washington Island lavender farmer, was made treasurer.
The group was extensive and had over 200 members.
Members who likened the board to a mafia.
Winnie Conrad, the florist, said this a year prior after requesting a police investigation into fraud among the board.
This past of anger towards the members led the police to look into Winnie.
I understand my past doesn't make me look good, but I didn't kill anyone. I was mad. I was hurt and angry, yes, but I would never kill anyone over it. I see the silver linings. I met Flora. I have less overhead and less stakes. I still get to choose my hours and clients, and now I don't have to pay a farming fee to get the flowers. It sucked, but I'm glad I'm here.
Detectives then asked for them to walk them through their day.
I knocked, and a girl, maybe mid-20s, opened the door. I heard Jackie shout something, unladylike. She shouted, "You bitch! How could you do this to me?" But the girl reassured me she was trying to fix her sink, so I didn't think anything of it.
So at the end of it all, we have two questions. Who was the other car, and why did Jackie turn off the cameras?
Lucky for us, someone knew. Someone survived. But we'll get back into that and more after the break.
Welcome back. Now I wonder how many of you listeners have been screaming at us. What about Phoebe?
I mean, to be honest, I myself have been practically screaming about it. The issue is...
Phoebe was put in a medically induced coma. She had suffered severe head injuries and lost a dangerous amount of blood. Nina and Julia changed hotels to one closer to the hospital and brought Enrico and Dante with them. Consequently, the Wright-Charles family moved in 2 floors below.
An interesting detail was reported by a waitress named Sarah Chow to the police that night. Sarah reported seeing Julia and Harry in a full-out scream fight in the back hallway at the Sunshine Strip Mall. Thing is, she had seen this multiple times over the last few months.
Jesus. I wanted him to make sure his drug lord daughter kept my grandbaby clean. I like Rebecca, but I don't trust her.
Sure, yeah, I had an argument, but that was normal. We like friction. It keeps us excited. We could have easily just settled the debate, but arguing is fun. At least for Jules and I.
He said, "What?" I went to pick up Rico and I could smell tobacco on him. This is a crucial point for him, and Lord knows this is the point. He is at the most risk to slip and fall into some form of substance issues. I asked Harry to keep an eye. And yes, we argue more than we have to and have a little fun doing it, but nowhere near as much as he made it out to be.
But that's not even the biggest thing that happened that weekend.
Saturday the 28th was probably the biggest non-murder day in the case, as it was the day it was declared a serial killing.
We'll look more into the law enforcement side of that declaration next week, but today we want to look at the following announcement. A joint press appearance and statement was made an hour later outside the hotel the Aganato and Wright-Charles family were staying at.
This event was wrought with drama from its inception. For one, not one of the 3 wanted to do it, but police suggestion overruled them.
Then you have the alleged altercation between Carlotta and Robert mere minutes before stepping outside.
According to Dante, years later in one of the very rare interviews he's given, Robert was unaware that Carlotta would be joining them for the statement, and when she arrived, he tried to leave, being held back by Robbie Jr. and Nina, all while he was said to have been screaming about how he wouldn't stand behind the woman who killed his wife.
Carlotta seemed unfazed. In the statement, Nina spoke the most, while Carlotta made one remark and Robert stayed silent.
Joined by their collective lawyer, Christina Berg, they asked the public for any information on the murders, but more so asked for grace, dignity, and for the press to leave their kids alone. In that same interview, Dante said this.
I couldn't leave after Phoebe. After Dad died, it was surreal, and no one knew what to say or do, so they just ignored it. Stared and stayed silent. But once Phoebe was, well, you know, they started to whisper and talk and ask and console, and it was just overwhelming. And that was just the regular people at school. The worst part was truly the journalists. They waited outside of school for me and Benji and everyone else. And as it got worse, they got worse. So yeah, I stayed at the hotel most days. Luckily, my teachers were understanding. And of course, you know, the school system reacted well, so I wasn't hurt too bad. But yeah, Mom hoped that the plea would work, but it really did not. But then again, what could we have done?
So that's it for this week's episode of Locked Door County.
Once again, we're left with more answerless questions as the case continues to spiral further into the abyss.
Join us next week as we take a look into the next murder and learn more about the investigators and what a serial case really means.
Thank you for listening. This has been an episode of Gonsbach Productions presents Truer Crimes, Locked Door County. The story, all names, characters, and incidents portrayed in this production are fictitious. No identification with actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, and products are intended or should be inferred. Theme music track composed and mastered by Carlos Ortiz.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to address you and the public ourselves. We are the spouses of the victims. My husband, her husband, and his wife were brutally and senselessly murdered by what has now been officially classified as a suspected serial killer. We want justice, and the police are doing their best to bring that to us, but we need your help. If you know anything that could help us find justice for the victims, please come forward. And, in the meantime, we ask you to respect us and our families and grant us the respect, grace, and dignity we are owed in these unbearably trying times. Especially, we request you to leave our children alone. I know for a fact my son has been harassed by numerous reporters at school, and I want to make it very clear that I will not tolerate any harassment against my children, and I will press charges against anyone who does. And I have been told the same goes for any of Mr. Charles's kids.
And I want to make it clear that I am deeply insulted by the accusations against me. I have not killed anyone, and the further insinuation only serves to drive the wedge of grief further into my heart. So kindly keep my name out of your theories.
I think we've made our point. Thank you.